There were a lot of T-SQL enhancements that landed in SQL Server 2022. See all of them in action this week on Data Exposed MVP Edition. Hi, I'm Anna Hoffman, and welcome to this episode of Data Exposed MVP Edition. Today, I'm joined by Lenni and MVP. Lenni, thanks so much for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. I'm a full stack app developer, database applications, specialty, Microsoft Stack, SQL Server, C#, .NET, full stack, front end as well. And last number of years, I've been doing consulting for government legislation systems that are throwing out their old dinosaur legacy systems for brand shiny new .NET solutions.
Cool. Awesome. Today, we're going to be talking about T-SQL enhancements in SQL Server 2022, and I know you have a bunch of demos planned. So let's get right into it. Tell us what you're going to show us.
Well, I've got right here on the slide, you can see I've got a list of 9 enhancements. They're really not related to one another, so I'm just going to bang them out one after the other, and then we can talk a little bit more about them right after.
Cool.
So with that, we'll start with the date bucket. And what date bucket lets you do is lets you organize a series of dates into buckets, essentially, of any size. So here I'm showing a date bucket that is a size of 2 days for the range of dates of January 1st through January 8th with an origin of January 1st. And what you can see is that you're getting the date of the first day of the bucket. And it's a 2-day bucket, so January 1st, January 3rd, January 5th, January 7th. Each set of 2 days belongs into the same bucket. If I run the same code on the same dates, except I set the origin date to be a day earlier than before, you'll still see 2-day buckets, but the first day is actually the second day of a 2-day bucket where it ends the last day of the previous year, and now we're looking at 2-day buckets starting from January 2nd. So you set the origin, you set the date size, and then you can perform aggregations or calculations against ranges of dates, against buckets of dates. So for example, here's a 3-day bucket. You're saying date bucket day 3, January 1 for these 3, January 4 for these 3. Those 3 days, each 3 days are in their own bucket. Bump it up to a week. The first 7, of course, belong to the 1 week, and then we enter the next bucket for the following week on the 8th. Bump it up to a month. No matter what date I supply, I'm going to get the month of the bucket for that date, so it would be the first of that month. If we want to do something like simplify week boundary calculations, like for instance, I just want to find the most recent Saturday, it's very easy to create a week bucket, a week size bucket, and take any known Saturday as the origin. And of course, last Saturday was May 11th. If I apply this to a database table, I can look at the due date, quarter date bucket. Yeah, we could get the date part of quarter before and know that it was in the second quarter, but we wouldn't also know what year it's in. So that's it for date bucket. Now let's look at DATETRUNC, a bit simpler, and it does just what its name says. It truncates a date. So if I have a full date, I can truncate it down to the quarter or down to the year.
Nice.
Quarter, second quarter, right? And start of the year. Or even date and time portions, down to the hour, down to the day. Truncated down to the hour, truncated down to the day. And these are all the options, where it's interesting to note that in the case of truncating down to the week, there's an ISO week and there's a regular week. The ISO week always starts on Monday. The regular week, you can actually set what the meaningful first day of the week is for your scenario.
Nice. That's awesome. I could see some scenarios where this would be really useful.
Certainly for any kind of date or date range aggregations. This next one is actually one of my favorites, least and greatest. It's like min and max, but across columns. So just to show with some simple examples here, First of all, that you'll get numeric conversions from strings down to numerics, showing me the smallest value and the largest value of a set of values. So it's like min and max, but across a row instead of across, except across columns instead of across rows. So we could achieve the same thing by using these very verbose and ugly case statements. And this would actually deteriorate as we had even more values. But let's look at it in action, where I might have a company table with a row for each company. And each company has been updated by up to 3 apps. And I want to get the earliest and latest value across these column values. So it's like min and max across columns as well. And there you have it. This is the earliest date across those 3 and the latest date. All right. Let's look at string split. So we've had string split for a while, since SQL Server 2016. Here I'm splitting on the slash, but what they've added in SQL Server 2022 is this enable ordinal parameter, which will give me, in addition to the value, the actual ordinal, where it's not necessarily guaranteed to preserve the order, especially you might yourself reorder things. And you need to tie to your original ordinal. So for example, I might want to deduplicate these values, but preserve their ordinal. Right? I want to dedupe, I want to get rid of the duplicate bravos, but I want to keep their order. Well, I'm just going to do a group by on the value and pick the min ordinal to achieve that, which wouldn't be possible without the ordinal parameter. And there you have it. And that's string split.
Nice.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen that one.
Okay, that's they slipped it in under the radar. This next one is actually also another one of my favorites. Generate series. How many times have we wanted to do this? Simply generate a series of numbers, which we could do in the past using CTEs, but they don't perform well, especially with large numbers, and you have to worry about max recursion. Now we've got a new generate series function. Generate a series of numbers from 1 to 10, and it gives you a table value result. So this is a table value function, or between 1 and 50 in increments of 5. Or using decimal values, and supporting parameterization as well. It won't generate dates, but you can combine date diff with date to generate a series of dates, like so, right?
Nice.
This is my desired start date, my desired end date. I just got to calculate the date count and do a date add, and then it will generate dates for me. So here's a perfect scenario for that, where I might have sales data, but not where I'm, let's say, selling cars, but I'm not selling the car necessarily every hour. So for the business hours of 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 4 p.m., I have no sales. If I did this with an ordinary group by, I'm missing 10 a.m., and I'm missing 2 p.m., etc., because there were no sales during that period. But if instead I use generate series inside of a common table expression to generate my source data, I'm going to get 1 hour intervals, even if there are no sales, which I can easily join on and get my desired report.
Awesome.
So it's generate series. All right, let's look at trim, the least compelling, but trim, but still nonetheless is now finally, with the inclusion of the trailing and leading keywords, the one size fits all that could actually ultimately eliminate LTRIM and RTRIM, which have been around forever. Because by specifying the new leading and trailing keywords, you get the left trim and RTRIM behavior, as well as the ability to trim custom noise characters. All right, moving on to is distinct from or is not distinct from. This one I think you're going to really like, because we've always had this headache of comparing values where nulls are involved. Here I'm doing a simple equal and not equal test. This looks like it should be perfect, right? It is perfect as long as there are no nulls. 5 does not equal 10, and 5 does equal 5. But when nulls are involved, I don't get any result. Because you know what we have to do. We have to do this the ugly way. We have to test for null. This one will work, but it really requires us to add a lot of ugly code. But now you can see that it's going to work for all 4 scenarios. Not equal, equal, not equal, equal. There you have it.
Yep.
If you went ahead, and I'm not going to run the last part of the demo, but if you did this against an index, you would also get an index seek, which is what you want, instead of an index scan, which is what you would get using the hacks of the past. So definitely want to check out is distinct from and is not distinct from. All right, that's taking us on to windowing enhancements. Right, so with windowing enhancements, and we've had windowing for a long time, hopefully you're aware of this powerful capability, where here I'm going to just populate some transaction data, where you can see I've got transactions across 3 accounts, across various dates for various amounts, and you combining the traditional aggregate functions with the window clause over allows me to get running aggregations and sliding aggregations. These are my running aggregations. These are my sliding aggregations across the entire account in the case of running aggregations, where I partition by account ID. Or even further constrained to just the current row and the preceding 2 rows and get those values. And here, this for account 1, for example. Yeah, here are all the running aggregations. And here are all the sliding aggregations. Right. So without getting into the details of windowing, you can just see from looking at this code that there's a lot of duplication. Now, this is a simple demo, so everything's like adjacent to one another. But in the real world, you would have this code duplication scattered throughout various parts of a very verbose query that's difficult to maintain. And so added in SQL Server 2022 is the window keyword, where I can define the window once and say I want to partition by account ID and order by transaction date and express that once and then reuse it, as I'm doing here.
Nice. Yeah,
right.
Just
What's that?
Simplifies the whole thing.
And it makes a huge difference, like I said, for those large unmaintained things. And actually, if you look at this last example, there is some duplication here, because these running aggregations are reusing win. These sliding aggregations are reusing win, but then repeating between the 2 preceding and current row. So I can actually have 2 defined windows, one for win running, which defines the running portion, and one for win sliding, which is based on win running and defines the sliding window as well. And you'll see the identical results. And that takes us to our ninth and last set of enhancements. And this is bit manipulation. So this is for doing things like bit masking, or perhaps compression or encoding, where I might have, using a simple example here, a customer table where inside of one column called colors, which is a tiny int, which is 8 bits, I'm actually going to store 8 colors. And inside of one column called min-max, which is another tiny int of 8 bits, I'm not going to actually store 2 4-bit values across the 8 positions, right? And so I'm going to populate those encoded and compressed values using this binary notation. So here, min is 3, max is 0, min is 7, max is 14, right, if you will. And using the new, and unfortunately the IntelliSense hasn't caught up in SSMS, but you can discount the red squigglies. Using the new bit count, you can find out how many bits are set, and you can pluck out the individual bits. So you can actually embed this select statement inside of a stored procedure and get out the colors as discrete columns, even though we only have everything inside of one column, colors hex, or colors, I should say. The same thing with min-max, where we're storing 1 value, but we could unpack it into 2. And we can do that by calling getBit, as well as doing a right shift and doing a bitwise AND to perform that bit manipulation. So there you have it, in as quick as I could possibly present it to you, the T-SQL enhancements in SQL Server 2022.
Lenni, that was so many enhancements. I gotta ask, here we go. Which one of these is your favorite one?
I would have to say generate series and is distinct from. Especially is distinct from. If you ever play with the merge statement, right? It's not uncommon to build like kind of a data compare engine using merge, where you are comparing a source table with a target table, and you only want to do an update if any of the non-key columns have changed, and you have to therefore check the source and target each individual source and target column for equality. And if nulls are involved, and they always are, right? Unless you're really lucky and you have to worry about nulls, It's an extremely verbose and difficult to
Right.
maintain and difficult to write code, read and write code, handling all the null checks instead of simply saying is distinct from to mean is different than or is not distinct from meaning equal, where nulls are treated as ordinary values.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Lenni, I learned so much in this video. I think all of our viewers did as well too. So thanks so much for sharing them with us. To our viewers, if you like this episode, go ahead and give it a like, leave us a comment, and let us know what your favorite T-SQL enhancement of 2022 that Lenni shared today was. And we hope to see you next time on Data Exposed.